Hi there, I am Debbie Delbridge, and I am going to tell you how to put together a stand-up comedy routine. As promised, in my last video, I told you that I would be doing this. Before I dive in, I want to just tell you some terms so you have some general information about it, and then I'll get into the meat of it. First of all, in the old days, stand-up comics used to just be thrown, like in the 70s, old days. Stand-up comics used to just like go on stage at an open mic and just see what comes out of their mouth, and they'd hope that it was funny. Thankfully, we've gravitated more to a memorized monologue. And actually, if you watched the last video, you know that I took a stand-up comedy workshop back in the spring of '94 that taught me a lot of the different components that I'm actually going to be reviewing with you in this video. But that's how they did it in the old days. It is a monologue. It's a memorized routine. If you have any acting background, you know that a monologue is an actor communicating one way. You know that a dialogue is a two-way conversation. Stand-up comedy is actually considered let me get this term correctly, a dialogic communication. So it does require interaction with the audience in order to work. So if a professor, dialogic communication, if a professor is giving a lecture, that is considered a dialogic communication. So even though he's the only one talking, he is looking for the response of his students in order to give his material. So he needs that feedback in order to know what points to touch on, what points to maybe go on, if they have a confused look on their face, what points to go over in a more of a responsive way on his side. So stand-up comedy is considered a dialogic communication. It is, there have been several different styles. There is, you could tell jokes, stories, one-liners, you could use props, you can use instruments. There's not a lot of hard set rules. It's basically whatever works for you is totally acceptable. In the old days, the comedians used to have more one-liners. You know, you think of the Rodney Dangerfield and the one-liner laugh, set up, laugh. And then, even Phyllis Diller was one-liner laugh. And if comedians throughout the decades, a lot of them have done the one-liners. However, now, if you watch a lot of stand-up comedy, more of them have gravitated over to this more autobiography type thing. And it really is a quasi-autobiography. It is segments of their life, and a lot of it is exaggerated. Some of it's made up. Some of it has some truth in it. But when they talk, they talk about different things that's going on in their life. So that's more of what is done more often. Now, Jerry Steinfeld, when he was doing stand-up, he had a different type of stand-up comedy where he would do observational humor. It's like, did you ever notice, and he would bring up topics that would resonate with the audience, but it wasn't really a, slap your knee kind of punchline. There was no punchlines. He just was making people remember different things that, the sock that gets lost in the dryer, those kinds of things that we could all relate to. But that was his own signature type of stand-up comedy. Some of the terms for a routine can be called a shtick. So if you hear these terms, so you know what they are. Because again, this video is being done for the novice comedian, so some of these terms may not be familiar to you. So your act can be a shtick, act, routine, or set. All those things really mean the same thing. It means the entirety of your routine. Bit, B-I-T, is a term used for a set of jokes that revolve around one topic. I have fair skin, so when I've done stand-up comedy in the past, and probably, in some of the new stuff that I'm putting together, I will have a bit about being fair-skinned. So a bit is basically a segment around a certain topic within the larger meat of your routine. And you could also have add-ons. An add-on can be a twist, it could be a topper, it could be a tagline. A twist, we all know what that is. You're going one direction and then suddenly you throw the ball in the other direction. An A topper is where you say another funny thing on top of or right after your punchline to get another laugh without having to form another joke where it has a whole setup and then a punchline. It's just a topper. And you want to get as many toppers as you can to increase the number of laughs that you have in your total set. And then a tagline with this 5 to 7 minute routine that you're going to be putting together. I don't know that a lot of you would try to incorporate a tagline. It really is easier to do when you have a longer set, say a 45-minute set. But basically, if your punchline is Lipton tea, sorry, it's what was here. So if that's your punchline, what you try to do is integrate that into different parts of your routine down the road. And audiences love when you give a punchline again in a different context. So that would be a tagline as you go through. Okay, so if you are killing it, that means you're doing good. If you bombed, you did poorly. If you hear the term blue humor refers to a set that has a ton of foul language and just coarse language, and the subject matter's very adult and rough and R-rated. So that's what blue humor is. If you hear the term burned is if your material's burned. So typically a comedian will give their routine to an audience, and then they'll give that same routine to a different audience. But they can't give the same material to the same audience because the audience has already heard that material. So that material would be burned and the comedian would need to use different material. If somebody has done an HBO special and that material is out there on the internet and everywhere else, typically that comedian won't use that same material in future engagements because that material is then considered burned. So that gives you just some insight on some of the terminology. In a typical stand-up comedy, now we're not doing typical, but I'm just telling you some of just the phrases and the meanings and that kind of thing. In a typical stand-up comedy show, there would be an opener who does a 5 to 7 minute routine. That opener is usually the MC. It doesn't have to be, but can be. And then a lot of times there is a feature act, and that person may do a 10 to 15 minute set. And then there is the headliner. The headliner is the big name. The headliner is the one that the people really came to see. They usually do about a 45-minute set. And the positioning of the entire evening is important because really the opener may have excellent material, but they're not going to get as big of laughs and from the audience because the audience isn't warmed up. In fact, it is the opener's job to help warm up the audience. Because a lot of times you could find, like if you're watching a show at home and something's funny, sometimes you are laughing on the inside, sometimes it's actually out loud, but a lot of times you find things funny, but you don't express them outward in a laugh and a clap and that kind of thing. So the opener's job is really to get the audience more involved and express their response outwardly. So not laughing on the inside, but clapping and laughing and get them worked up because the comedian needs that. There is, stand-up comedy has a very different synergy than if you were to just be telling somebody an embarrassing story or a joke at the water cooler. There's a synergy with as I talked about, that dialogic communication. The stand-up comedian needs feedback from the audience in order for their timing to work, in order for their material to work. So if somebody is auditioning their stand-up material in front of 1 or 2 people, it's gonna fall flat on their face because it doesn't have the synergy, the responsiveness from the audience. It doesn't matter how great the comedian is, you really need that audience interaction and feedback in order for material to be considered good. I hope that explains it. So with the headliner, because the headliner is doing a 45-minute set, one, the headliner has a big ego, and so they want to have laughs at every joke, every laugh point. But because their set is 45 minutes, there's going to be material that's very, very strong, and then there's going to be material that is not as strong, just mediocre. But that comedian needs to get the big laughs all the way through in order for the entire set to work. So that's another reason why the headliner always goes last, because the audience is very warmed up and they just respond to anything. And that's what we need. We need them to respond to anything and everything, even if there is a weaker joke. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your onstage persona. Onstage persona, you know, there are no hard set rules. I've seen comedians that take on a totally different persona when they are on stage. Or a lot of times they could just turn up the volume of their natural personality. If their natural personality is to talk in the very monotone way, then you can do that. And that's called deadpan humor. I think that whole thing was coined by Stephen Wright. He's a comedian that's been around for decades. And basically he gave his whole routine in a very monotone thing. And it was funny because he was so monotone. But we see that deadpan humor in other comedians. Nick Offerman, who was on the sitcom Parks and Recreation. If you notice, if you ever watched that show, when he was talking and everybody would be, oh, this is going through all this drama, everything he said has zero emotion. Well, that zero emotion was part of his act. And then you see him in commercials or you see him in other things. It's the same thing. Some of you know who Bob Newhart is. Some of you may not. He's a comedian that's been around thousands of years. But his humor is all stuttering and stammering. You know, I was doing that on purpose. He stammers over his words, well, you know, to get his sentences out, and that's what works for him. So he had the Bob Newhart show back in the 70s, and then he has played himself recently on The Big Bang Theory, and he did the same thing. He was playing himself, but he still did that stammering type of caricature as part of his persona. So, now, I doubt he talks like that when he's sitting around talking with friends, but you want to take your onstage persona. I think it's a good idea to take your own personality and turn up the volume. I typically, when I'm in a fun mood, you know, if I'm just out to lunch with somebody, I may not be very boisterous and outgoing and demonstrative, but sometimes I am. So when I do public speaking, I typically over-enunciate just because that's a habit, because people have a hard time hearing and understanding. So I over-enunciate and I tend to be more animated in my speaking. Well, at those occasions when I've done stand-up comedy, I'm more animated just because that is what I do. I take my own personality and then just turn up the volume to a 10. So that's something I would suggest. I would suggest doing something that makes you unique. You don't want to be like the person that is in front of you or in back of you. You want to stand out somehow, some way. And you could do that with just your onstage persona. The rhythm of your voice, how you carry yourself. There's all kinds of ways to actually do that. You know, I'm reminded of, because sometimes it's not your material that's so great. Sometimes it is how you deliver it. I'm reminded of an old comedian. Sometimes his material was too crass, so I don't know that you want to look him up on YouTube. But Sam Kinison used to literally scream all of his punchlines, and it was hilarious. You know, he'd be talking normal, and then he'd scream, you know, and it worked for him. But that was something that was unique to him, and it worked. So don't be shy about experimenting with different types of onstage personas, because sometimes the material is good and sometimes your persona just makes it funny. There's a comedian who has gotten very popular the last couple years since COVID, and she's a tall woman in her 50s with blonde hair. She talks about her husband and her children. She has a Kentucky accent. And if you listen to her material, it's not that her material is so slappy or new funny, it's her delivery. So there's really two different things with your onstage persona. There is your material, and then it's your delivery. Your onstage persona is more of you working on your style and how you're going to deliver it, and what kind of message are you sending to the people, really just even non-verbally. So there's another thing you could do with your onstage persona, especially if you're somebody that's animated, with being over animated, is you look at comedians like Lucille Ball and Carol Burnett. In all the little sketch comedy that they did, they were always over dramatic with their facial antics. Jim Carrey, when he first started doing stand-up, and then that very first show that he had, was that In Living Color? I don't know what it was. But I mean, he played all these different characters and he did all kinds of facial aerobics. I'm not saying everybody needs to, you know, mug for the camera, because that's considered mugging when you do lots of facial expressions. But that is something that you can try if it's something that is comfortable for you. Another thing I would suggest that everybody, if you are on Facebook, and I assume that you are because everybody is, is to subscribe or like the page Drybar, D-R-Y-B-A-R. It basically has clean comedians, and every day, every other day, you, something will appear on your feed that will give you a 5-minute routine, or somebody doing a 30-minute routine. But by watching different comedians, and especially after knowing some of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you in this video, you'll be able to kind of look behind the scenes and see, okay, I see what they did there. I see what they did. And you'll be able to see what works and what doesn't work. Now, I've been astounded that the audiences always are very receptive. They don't have any bad audiences on Drybar. But because even when there's a comedian that's not so great, the people are still very engaged and they're giving them the right feedback and claps and laughs and that kind of thing. But some of the comedians on there are outstanding. Both their delivery, whether it be their delivery, whether it be their onstage persona, or whether it be their material, they're just top notch. While other ones, they have a really great persona and delivery, but their material is just okay. But I've seen a couple. Now, the majority of them are fantastic. Well, the majority of them are good. There is 10% that is very, very good. And then I would say there's probably 10% that really doesn't belong on stage. It's like, oh, the material isn't good. Because I understand if somebody is having, you know, a bad night where their delivery may not be super great, but then the material should be able to stand on its own. And I've watched a couple, I've watched a lot of shows on there. I've watched a couple of them that, wow, it's like there's just nothing good about this person taking up my time. It's like there was no redeeming factor. And then I watched one of them the other day. He had a 25-minute set. The entire first 7 minutes of his act, his delivery was okay, but he had zero funny material. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, the material was bad. But then the next 7 minutes was on point. His material was strong. His delivery was strong. And then the last 7-10 minutes, he was like scraping the bottom of the barrel, and you could tell it. I could tell just with my novice eyes or whatever, that middle set was what he's used to giving. He's used to giving a shorter routine, and because he was going to be doing the special for Drybar, he came up with material that wasn't very strong, and then he ended it with material that wasn't very strong, because he wasn't able to build a strong enough, you know, act. He wasn't able. So that middle material was his strong point. So the idea with doing the 5 to 7 minute routine is we want to have 5 to 7 minutes that's very, very strong. And especially with being a novice, you got to make sure that in case the delivery isn't totally on point, we need the material to be able to be strong and stand on its own 2 feet in case there's a little bit of weakness with the delivery when the performance is actually done. I hope that makes sense. So we need to, couple of different points is we need to always make sure that we speak very, very clearly, enunciate and pronounce your words. And that could be, if that's not something you're used to, that may be something that you need to rehearse and do and incorporate into yourself. I watched one comedian a few weeks ago, and he said some words. I don't know what he said. It's like I couldn't even guess what he said. He was giving his delivery, but part of his setup, he said something, and he mumbled. I couldn't understand what he said. So that entire joke was a throwaway, and he looked surprised that the audience didn't have a bigger response to it. Well, it's because they couldn't understand what he was saying. So you have to make sure that as you're giving your monologue and you're doing your material, that you are clearly understood. That's why, if there's too much noise going on in the background, or if you have music playing in the background as part of your routine, you have to still make sure that the audience is able to hear every word. If you are somebody that has an accent, that's fine. That's good, because we want all kinds of different varieties, but make sure that you enunciate well enough that people can hear you. I have a hard time when people call me for different things because I can't see their mouth move. A lot of times, if they have an accent, it's hard for me to understand what they're saying. So if you do have an accent for your routine, work on it so it becomes clear enough for somebody to really understand clearly. Now let's talk about timing a little bit. Okay, so in a typical joke, so say this is your punchline, and then the audience figures it out, the light bulb went off, they understand, oh, that was funny, ha ha, and this is the height of it. So this is this is laughs or claps or whatever it is. And then as it starts to wane, but before it hits another flat line, this is where you would start your next set of material. You don't want to wait till all the laughs die down and there's complete silence before starting in on your next joke. I've seen that. We've seen that sometimes, and we see sometimes the comedian will do that, and then he'll walk over to that little bench that they have, and he'll get a sip of water. What people don't know is sometimes there's a little cheat sheet on that bench. So, and what that cheat sheet may have, and this happens sometimes if somebody's doing a big, long 45-minute set, that will have the bits. So the bits are all memorized, the bit about all the jokes revolving around the different points that you're talking about. But sometimes the comedian may lose track as far as, okay, which bit comes next. So I have seen some comedians have a little cheat sheet on that little bench thing. Now, this routine that you're putting together is going to be short, so we're not going to need a cheat sheet. And that's really why we're doing a 5 to 7 minute routine, because that length is long enough for you to memorize without getting too much anxiety about it. So, so that if you're wondering, well, why are we doing it 5 to 7 minutes? The primary reason is so it's easy for you to memorize, so it's not too much of a strain on you. Now, if you have super duper excellent material for a whole 10 minutes and you have really great memorization skills, you don't have to trim 7 minutes off. When we talk together, then we can discuss that. But really the target is 5 to 7 minutes, mostly because we don't want it to be difficult to memorize it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about self-deprecation. Now, if you know me, or you've read any of my books, or you've heard me speak at different things, you know that I am very, very anti-self-deprecation. So because I understand how the conscious mind and the subconscious mind works, we know that we don't, when we have negative self-talk, let's not verbalize it, because all you're doing is reinforcing that in your self-esteem and your identity. That's why you don't call a child stupid, because that word, that label has a chance of getting ingrained into their identity and their subconscious mind, and then they'll carry that with them throughout their life. So I'm very aware of identity shaping words, not brand new information to anybody that knows me. However, with stand-up comedy, some self-deprecation can be a good thing. What? Yes. I know some people are going, Debbie Delbridge said that? Yes, it is. And here's why. There's a couple reasons why. If somebody seems like they're too perfect, or they have it all together, they're not as relatable to the audience. So the audience warms up to somebody that doesn't come across too perfect. Also, because everyone in the audience has things about themselves that they don't like. And if you were able to make fun of some of the stuff that you don't like about yourself, it's kind of cathartic to them, because it helps them think, you know what, I shouldn't take myself so seriously. Everybody has issues, and they do. So, so doing a little bit of self-deprecation is a good thing in stand-up comedy. But don't get up there and just totally bash yourself, because then the audience is going to start to feel sorry for you, and they're going to find you after the meeting, and they're going to give you the name of their counselor. So don't do too much self-deprecation, but a little bit is fine, to show that you could laugh at some things that are not perfect about you. Is cathartic to them. It makes them think it's okay not to be perfect. And it is okay not to be perfect. Okay, and then also with your onstage persona, if there's something very unusual about yourself, don't ignore the elephant in the room. I have red hair, freckles, white skin, and I weigh too much. So you know what? Those things are integrated into my routine, because I look a little bit more unusual than somebody else. If you're super duper tall, or you're super duper short, or something is very unique about you, go ahead and put it into your routine, because the audience may be thinking it. So you don't have to have your whole routine revolve around that, but have a line or two just to address the elephant in the room. Yes, I'm unusual, you know. whatever that thing may be. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what kinds of things are funny. When I went through this stand-up comedy workshop 28 years ago, so it was the spring of '97, so that was a very long time ago. I don't remember everything the guy said, but I do remember a couple things. He told me one where I can get material, and I'll talk about that in another section. But he also talked about stand-up comedy is basically shock value. The audience thinks you're going in one direction, and then you go in another direction and you shock them. So that's basically the essence of most jokes. There's other ways you could find jokes. You know, you can, I think if you look online, there's people that sell trainings on how to do stand-up, and they list some different things. But you know what? If you want to waste your time and money, you can. But because I've looked at some of those before I put together this video, I don't know that that's really necessary, but that's something you can do. But shock people. So I'm going to give you an example. A joke that I had used when I did stand-up comedy a long time ago was this one. You know, they say that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. I don't think so. I think the way to a man's heart is through his chest. What? It's just faster. So, I mean, that is a joke. So basically, the setup was, they say that the way to a man's heart. So the people are thinking in terms of, oh, you want to catch a man, give him good food. But then I switched the meaning of that line over to the surgical, murderous approach of, through a man's chest. So, so that is the essence of a joke. Now, that particular one-liner type of joke, I actually had gotten out of a Milton Berle joke book that was written in the 70s. So, but I'm going to tell you how to get some material in a second. So I jumped a little bit ahead of myself there. Okay, so what kinds of things are funny? Now, you notice what I did was I gave the punchline through a man's chest, and then what I did is I added a topper. What? It's just faster. So trying to get another laugh, an additional laugh on top of the main punchline is an example of an add-on. So I'm trying not to wear my glasses as much so you don't have a horrible glare. What's on my forehead? Is that pen? Sorry. Sorry, people. But I'm 29 minutes in and I don't want to start over, so it's okay. So, so shock value is very important. And then also nostalgic references can be very good. So if you're telling stories from your childhood, you know, integrate things that were popular back then of, you know, the Wonder Bread and the Big Wheel. People just resonate with things that are nostalgic to them that you bring up from the past. So you could always get a cheap laugh out of something that you bring up that's nostalgic. Over-exaggerating works a lot. And because you're going to craft your material, You're going to be careful with the word choices you use, but exaggerate with the words that you use. Make it, maybe do a thesaurus check. Okay, this word would be more interesting in there. So play with your word choices and to bring a bigger exaggeration. It's like, oh, the pimple was the size of the Titanic. I mean, so, exaggerate. And don't be afraid to use metaphors and similes. They're very, very effective and good. Just don't use ones that are overdone. If there's similes that everybody and their brother uses, then choose them that aren't overdone, So metaphors are very good. You can have a metaphor. Her skin was so dry, it looked like a lizard molting. Ew. And you can have taglines. So a tagline is, ew. That's something that I do in real life, but I could, if I wanted to, incorporate that as a tagline and use that ew at different points in my routine. You can have a tagline if there is something that you wanted to integrate. Don't be afraid of that. See if it works, see if it doesn't work. Another thing to do is say things that people may be thinking but don't actually say out loud. Facial reactions, not tagline, I didn't mean tagline, that was a catchphrase. You could have your own signature catchphrase of the ew. It's not a tagline because that's not a punchline, but you can have catchphrases and different things incorporated into your routine. And then here's one that I actually kind of discovered by accident. And I just discovered this the last few months or so, that it's like, oh man, these things could be really funny, is to incorporate an attribute to something that doesn't belong. So, and I kind of got the idea for that from my daughter's piano teacher. My daughter's piano teacher, we had, when this cat had kittens, we'd given her a couple of kittens, and then she would always say, you be good Christian kitties. So she attached spirituality to the cats. And as part of the routine that I'm working on now, I have a huge bit on the cats because I accidentally became a cat lady. So that has been incorporated into the material that I'm working on now. And there's different pieces of it that I've incorporated a spirituality to the cats. So it makes it more funny. Of course, cats are not concerned with their spirituality and being good moral kitties. But it makes it funny because not only do I borrow that same line of you be good Christian kitties into my routine, I have a couple other jokes revolving around the spirituality of the cats, of the specific cats. And then I've also done that in another place where I attach evil motives to cameras. Cameras are equipment, but I have attached a nefarious motive. What gives them the right to decide which pictures I look okay in and which pictures they're going to slap 50 pounds on me? And then I just make it a whole conspiracy theory, make it really nefarious and evil motives, kind of a thing. So that's a little bit that I'm working on. But I mean, as you are working on different material, is there something that you can attach an attribute to that really doesn't belong? Because that is a way of designing and working on jokes to get an extra bang for your buck, to get extra laughs on it. Now, when I went through the stand-up comedy workshop, I was taught that a good stand-up comedy routine has 3 laughs per minute. So that could be one-liner laugh, one-liner laugh, one-liner laugh, or it could be tell a story for a minute and then laugh, laugh, laugh. So it doesn't have to be, every minute doesn't have to have exactly 3 in it, but what you want to do is, if your set is 5 minutes, have 15 laugh points. If it's 7 minutes, have 21 laugh points, at least 21 laugh points. So you want to make sure you follow that ratio of at least 3 minutes, 3 laughs per minute. And if you have over that, that's great. If not, that's okay too. Okay, let's talk about where you get your material. I was told never, never, never steal another comedian's material. That is a hard, fast rule that, That's just something that is known and accepted in the industry. You never do that. With the exception of this, if it is a comedian that has been dead for decades and the material that you're borrowing is something that didn't have a lot of popularity to it, then it's okay. So, for example, that joke about the way to a man's heart is through his stomach actually came from a Milton Berle book of 1,000 jokes or something like that. It came from a book of jokes. Now, a lot of that old material is, it just doesn't translate into today's vernacular. They're talking about beepers and fax machines and equipment that doesn't apply in today's world. But sometimes you'll stumble across one that you could take and modify and tweak and make it your own. Now, if you're looking for more one-liners, that could be an approach to go. Or you could take the essence of a one-liner and incorporate it into one of your stories that you're telling. If you're looking for just that thing, that surprise element, then that is free game to use. Another thing you could, another way of trying to get material is you can actually, since this is going out to churches and revivals and those kinds of things, and it's going to be Christian humor, you can get your material from the Bible. But please, please, please don't be too churchy and religious, because that's just annoying. But when I had done that stand-up comedy workshop in 2000, I taught a little workshop, and then we did a night of stand-up comedy at the church, that kind of thing. One of the students or participants in the workshop, he had an excellent bit. He was talking about how when Adam was naming the animals and God gave him that responsibility, he was so proud of himself. And at first he came up with these really elaborate names, hippopotamus. And then he named some other really big elaborate names. But then by day 3, he was so exhausted. He was like, I don't know, ox. And it was a hilarious bit for him. So he basically took a Bible study. He took a Bible story and tweaked it and brought lots of humor out of it. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be too religious that you're afraid to do any kind of modification. Where JK, just kidding, God. God's not going to get offended. If there's some Karens that get offended, you know what? That's on them. You know what? That really is on them. So don't be afraid of taking Bible stories and twisting them. Now, if you're going to take something from the Bible, make sure it's a Bible story that most people know and have heard of. Don't be talking about Abimelech and his sheep and his land. Most people that are not theologians don't know any of that stuff. So if you're going to do material from the Bible, do stories that everybody's familiar with. Do material that everybody, including non-Christians, would be basically familiar with, because it will resonate more. Okay, you can do, as you look and try to find material for different things, look at just body ailments that are not a big deal. Don't do serious ailments or anything, but stuff like toenail fungus or earwax or belly button goop or double chins or thigh chafing or anything that, even if you have it or you don't have it, but things that could be considered minor annoyances with people. People always find that kind of stuff funny. And think about, those kinds of things could help you figure out material, whether you have it, maybe a parent has it or something like that. Think about socially awkward moments. People riding up in the elevator together, standing in line at DMV, socially awkward moments, because you could use that as kind of part of your building material when you're coming up with jokes, socially awkward moments. I would suggest this. I would suggest that you take a notebook and you just write information about yourself. How many siblings do you have? Details about your parents, details about your life, city you grew up in. is there anything unique about the city you grew up in? Just brainstorm a lot of things. Now, you're not going to have jokes about every single thing that's on that, but really the idea of putting together this brainstorming notebook of a few pages is, it really is going to be seen like when you went to Home Depot and you loaded up your cart. Okay, got some wood planks and I got some of this. It's going to be the raw material that you're going to take and later build your routine around. So basically, you're just trying to get things that could be ideas. You're not going to, don't not list something because you don't have a joke for it. Just write it down because something may come to you later. Things like, are there any people in your life that annoy you? Or as a child, did they annoy you? Could that be the siblings or coworkers or neighbors? Do you have any neighbor issues or whatever it is? Things that annoy you, stuff that if you have appliances in your house that don't work. If you have I right now have a termite infestation at the other side of my house. So you know what? I'm going to write that down. Do you have a family of raccoons that live in your backyard? Do you have a rat in your backyard? Just write down raw information that basically could be used in the future. My daughter is deathly afraid, ridiculously afraid of any kind of bug. Ridiculous. I'm going to write that down. Do I have any material for that right now? No, but I'm going to write that down because that could be something that I could work with in the future as far as my future material. So just write down different things about your life, your work life. If there's a lady at work that's super annoying, kind of just, put her name down and what's annoying about her. But, so you're just brainstorming different things that you have that you can work with. Also, facts about your heritage, your home life growing up as a child, any childhood nicknames, memories from your past, things that you did on the playground growing up that people don't do today. What talents do you have? Do you sing? I've heard some comedians that have an excellent voice and they've incorporated singing into their routine and it's just hilarious. Do you have any dialects or accents? Now, I can do a very good Irish brogue and a Scottish brogue. I don't have material for that, but I would put that on my little brainstorming notebook. So I'm going to put things, if you yodel, if you do a weird whistle thing, put it on there. If you do voices, or if you make if you know how to make microphone sound effects, write that down because that may be able to be incorporated into your routine. Whatever things that you can do, doesn't mean you're going to, put it on that sheet of paper. Let me just go back to this. If you can do certain voices and dialects, just make sure that if you do incorporate another voice, make sure it's not something that is too stereotypical. I mean, I don't want to hear somebody doing an Indian man as a manager of a 7-Eleven. One, because the material has been done to death, and two, it's just like, it verges on almost racist. It's like, don't do stuff that's too stereotypical because it's like, and if you have a question about, hey, does this work? Does it not work? Then we could talk about that. Because, for example, there is a cute little Hispanic gal that does this whole impression of a Vietnamese woman who's doing the nails. And I'm sure you've seen, a lot of people have seen this. It's gotten millions of reviews and watches on social media. And it's a hilarious bit. Now, is that stereotypical? Yes, but it's so funny. So something like that could work. So there's like a fine line between what you can do and what you can't do. Now, if it is something that is about your own heritage, I've seen comedians just go to town and blast a lot of these stereotypical things, but somehow they're allowed to because it's part of their own heritage. So, we could talk about that, but just make sure that if you are doing another voice, that is not something that would be perceived as too stereotypical, bordering on racist. Okay. And you know what I really believe. So you're going to do this whole listing of just things that pertain to you. And if you wanted to, you could look up online Gary Gulman, Gulman. He has 365 tips for stand-up comedians. I glanced through there. You know, maybe 5 or 10 of them could be relevant to you, but, and feel free to read that and observe that. I just don't want you getting so bogged down with the process, you know, because these are comedians that work on material every day and they're just so intense about it. My fear of getting too involved with the mechanics of how to do a joke is that you'd kind of get lost in the translation and you'd be overwhelmed and you'd overthink it too much. It is my opinion that after you've done a lot of this brainstorming and know just the basics of, you know, integrate surprise elements or over exaggerate, choose your words carefully, all these kinds of things. I think if you're supposed to be involved in this, that God's going to help you. You could be washing the dishes and then all of a sudden this funny idea will come and it will be based off of one of the things you wrote on your little notebook thing. You could be sleeping and then you get this clever idea, or driving. If that's the case, go ahead and write it down. Don't wait and think you're going to remember it the same way. Record it on your phone or write it down, because sometimes if you don't record it right away, it may lose some of its funny because it's not said the exact same way or with the same emphasis, that kind of thing. So just jot it down and have that as part of your material. But so you're gonna do the brainstorming of different things, and then you could be on the treadmill. Oh, I thought of something else that I want to write down on my brainstorming thing, or you thought of an idea. So that notebook could have lots of pages of just different ideas of building material that could be used later. So, so write that down, do that. But I think the Holy Spirit will drop ideas. I explained this on my last video that I hadn't done stand-up comedy in a very long time. It wasn't on my radar, didn't intend to do it, didn't really want to do it. But then what happened the beginning of this year, there have been several times that I'll just be minding my own business, trying to sleep, and then I'll just get these like downloads of funny material out of something. I'm like, what? So I think God was doing these little deposits within me, one, because I think that he wants the stand-up comedy thing to come back within me, but I also believe a bigger picture within you. I think God will be using humor because it does do a lot of therapy for the soul. I believe God will be doing that in the future for different things. So I think some of these ideas, God will be giving you the ideas for the joke. So don't overthink it too much. Don't try so hard. I know that when I originally put together a stand-up routine, I didn't have these like download drops of just funny that I've had this last, you know, this is March. So I've had this year, because this just started happening this year in 2022. So I think just be open and be aware that God could drop little bits and pieces of funny to you. What you do is just write it down and then go from there. Now let's talk a little bit about editing. After you have different bits and you're going to have them written down, recognize this: you can't edit if something isn't written down. So you're going to look at your material and you're going to take these sentences for your setup and try to consider, how can I make this less words? Because remember, we want the formula to have more laughs per minute. So I could take these 4 words. It's like, well, what if I take these 4 words? I could exchange that for this 1 word. So look at ways that you could edit and make it less wordy. That, you know, being a writer, I am so very wordy. And my text messages are always this long because I feel like whoever I'm sending the message to needs all the information, when in fact 1 line would have done the trick. But so I over communicate. So, but when I do stand-up comedy, we got to edit, and just cut a lot of that fat out. And what is enough of the joke that they get the essence of the joke without it being too many words, so we fit within the 3 laughs per minute formula. And you're going to shorten it. Also, I would strongly suggest that you, if you have a bit, go ahead and practice it in the mirror, because oftentimes your toppers and twists and everything can come from just doing the material. And if you have a joke try it a few different ways. So I'll give you an example. So we had the, they say that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Try the punchline different ways. Through the man's heart is through his stomach, you know, or through his stomach, or innocent, through his stomach. You know, try the punchlines and the setup. Try it in different ways, different modes, and then you can kind of see what's funnier, what's not funny. You can kind of just play with it. Don't be so locked into your delivery that you only think there's one way to deliver a certain joke, because there's not. There's all kinds of different ways and approaches you could take with your delivery. So try it a few different ways to see what works the best. Also, when I was going through that stand-up comedy workshop, the instructor said that 10% of the material that you write down is actually good enough to make it to your stand-up comedy routine. I think that's a little harsh. I think it's probably 50% or 70% is strong enough to make it. I know just with some of the stuff that I was jotting down this year, there was some stuff, it's like, you know what, this right here, it's not as strong. So I deleted it because I was doing this all on the computer. But then in just studying this more, the stuff that you edit out, don't make it go away forever. Have that in your notebook, because there may be a time in another routine that you may be able to use that, and you have a way of making it stronger. So anything that you write down, keep it in case you are able to use that in the future. I was listening to one stand-up comedian. There's two comedians that were talking. They were having a discussion about their material and that kind of thing. And he was saying that he pulled material that he had jotted notes down from 2015, and all of a sudden he had a brilliant idea of how to make that segment funny. So with your old stuff, save it. Don't get rid of it totally, even if it's not something that is going to be incorporated into this this routine that you're developing now. Okay, and I would suggest actually getting in front of your camera and filming yourself so you could see yourself, or doing it in the mirror. But the camera is good because then you could watch it over several times and see what works and what doesn't work. So I would encourage that, and do it with a fake microphone. So you could do it with a hairbrush or anything else. If you have a microphone, that's great. If you don't, that's great. But have stuff written down. Also, don't be overly critical of your material. So if you're going to watch yourself of what you recorded, you may think, oh, none of that's good. Well, it may be, but remember that stand-up, in order for stand-up to work, it needs that synergy of the audience interaction. So you may not think your material is exceptional because you're not having that interaction with the audience. So I encourage you not to be overly critical, because you could overthink something and just, you could have zero material because you just overthink it. On the other hand, because most of you are novice comedians, we do want the material to be a good set. We don't rely too much on your delivery. Make sure the material is strong enough to stand alone in case the delivery isn't perfect the way you had wanted it to come out. We need the material to be strong enough to stand on its own, even if the delivery and timing could be a little bit off. Also, don't memorize your routine just yet. So what would happen is if you kind of feel a prompting that, hey, I may be interested in participating in this, I would like you to go ahead and send me an email through the website, just giving me your contact information so I could have that as part of a database. I don't plan on sending you any emails or blasting you. I really don't plan on contacting you unless there was a specific reason for something. But send me your initial contact information, and then after you've developed a routine, I want you to contact me again through the website, and then I will connect up with you, and we can get better contact information, direct cell lines and that kind of thing. And and then you could email me your routine that you've already worked on, you've edited to the best of your ability, and however many minutes it is. If you could type it out and have it double spaced, because sometimes what I would do is make little comments, you know, on the thing and maybe take a picture, send it back to you, just as far as suggestions or ideas. But I do want you to put an asterisk by those laugh points within your thing that you're going to email me. And then if you have the ability to send me a video of yourself, perfect. If you can't, because I know sometimes sending videos is difficult, then maybe we can FaceTime and we could just go through some points on the delivery. And don't worry, I'm able to see through everything to know what is workable material, what's not workable material. But again, don't memorize it. Before I go into to microphone techniques, I want to just point out, I strongly suggest, I know I mentioned this with dry bar, to watch dry bar, but you'll be able to see what comedians are doing right and what they're doing wrong, what material is actually good and standalone material, and what material is relying too much on the delivery. And you could see that, again, most of these guys are good, but some of them, I think you actually learn more from the people that aren't good, because you can see what they did wrong, and then that will be a helpful tool for you to when you're putting together your routine. So I do encourage you to subscribe to Dry Bar. It's clean humor. That show is filmed in Provo, Utah, so that's Mormon country, so you don't have to worry about it being foul language or anything else. It's clean material. I do suggest you subscribe to that. I would recommend that you do work on, now you're not going to memorize your set just yet, but what you can do is have a memorized opening and closing. Now the MC will introduce you, but a lot of times the audience doesn't catch your name very well. So most comedians, when they enter the stage, they say their name again. Hi, how y'all doing? I'm Debbie Delbridge. Good to see you, whatever. So it's not a bad idea to say your name. Some comedians also say their name as they're winding up at the end, just because sometimes people are wondering, now, who is that again? What is their name? So a lot of what you're doing, it's not that you're trying to really make an impression on the audience, but you're answering the audience's questions without them verbally asking it. Because a lot of times people wonder, what was their name? Oh, that was so funny. What was their name? So you're just basically answering that question. What I would suggest is, now when you do stand-up, traditionally, there will always be a mic stand and the microphone when you come up. Now the mic can be different heights. Rather than, never try to adjust the mic to your height, because typically the comedian, unless you do a lot of visual humor and you need both hands, most comedians are going to take the mic out of the stand. And so you do that when you first get to the stage. So you get to the stand, you take the microphone out in your introduction. How you guys all doing? And you want to do that at a point where you're not trying to be funny. You're not telling a joke, because, and you want it to be one smooth transition. You want it to be one smooth transition. And also, let me just mention this. Your act doesn't start when you grab the microphone. Your act starts the minute they see you. So that means you need to walk on stage with confidence, make them believe you are having the time of your life and this is the funnest thing you've ever done in your life. Even if you're nervous, do not let it show that you're nervous. With the exception being is if your character that you're doing is overly nervous. Hi, whatever character. If you're doing a character that's nervous in your performance, then go ahead and walk on stage like that. Otherwise, do not. Walk on stage with confidence. And if you need to practice that and have some friends evaluate how you walk up on stage, then that's okay. Because sometimes people are not aware of the persona that they exude, whether it has confidence or not confidence. So you're going to walk on stage. The mic is going to be here. You're going to grab that. Hi, how y'all doing? Now you're going to grab the mic and you're going to take it and you're going to put it 3 feet behind you. It doesn't matter which side you do it. It's up to you. But you don't want to do your entire routine with the microphone stand right next to you. One, it's going to distract attention and people are going to be looking at the microphone and not at you. But then people are going to be wondering, why is the mic stand still there? Is she going to use it in her next joke? What's she going to do? Oh my goodness, what's she going to do? Does she know the microphone stand is there? So don't, it's best to just take the microphone stand, put it behind you, so it's out of sight, out of mind, and they're not thinking about it. Now, there could be jokes that you need both hands, that you're going to grab it and take it and then put it back in, so you have both hands to work with, or you could do some mic stand humor or whatever. But the idea is get it out of your way, out of their eyesight, but not far enough away that it's too hard to retrieve if you need it. And at the end, how you do your ending, this is what we don't want. We don't want you to say your last joke and then be fumbling to get the mic stand back, the mic back in the mic stand while you've already finished. We don't want that. We want it to be as smooth as transition. What I typically have done in the past is I would before my last joke, I would grab the mic stand and I would pull it up and I go, before I go, I want to just tell you what happened the last time, but whatever it is I'm saying. So I give them a warning that my last joke is approaching, and I typically grab the mic stand and put the mic back in the stand. So when I'm done, I go, I'm Debbie Delbridge. You guys have been a great audience. Love you. Bye-bye. And they're still laughing, clapping as I exit. You want them still at the height of their laughing and clapping, or maybe not laughing, but at least clapping while you're exiting the stage. Okay, don't let that die down and you still be on stage. Get off stage at the height of the clapping. Now I want to talk just a little bit about microphone techniques. You don't want the microphone here. They need to see your mouth. You don't want it down here because you drive the sound guy crazy. And then what if you wrestle with your shirt or whatever? So ideally you want it just at the base of your chin, and you want it here. And this is one of the reasons why I suggest practicing with a brush, because as you turn and as you do this, the microphone needs to be with you. You don't want to do this, because then the audience won't be able to hear you. It's too hard for the sound guy to be able to follow you. If you do a scream, it's okay to go down a little bit, but for the majority of your stuff, keep the microphone right here and practice with it right here. Now I'm going to tell you something that is really good information. Are you ready? The microphone isn't just a sound instrument. The microphone can be used as a tool to tell your audience when it's okay to laugh. So you tell your punchline of straight through the heart or whatever it is. And then by simply taking your mouth or taking the mic away from your mouth, it gives permission for the audience to respond bigger. If you keep the microphone here the entire time, you may not get a biggest reaction with your joke because the audience doesn't want to miss the next thing you're going to say. They may laugh on the inside or just a little bit, but they don't want to miss any of this because it's such good material. But by using the microphone and go, what? Doing this with the microphone gives them permission to laugh and react if you use the microphone that way. So that's why I do think it's a good idea to practice with a real microphone or with an instrument, water bottle, hairbrush, whatever that can be used as a microphone. Okay, so you got what we're going to be doing. We're going to be working on getting together a material. And I'm kind of busy with all the different things that I'm doing. So don't email me after each joke. Preferably, I would want you to have your the material as strong as you can get it. You know what? If you don't get your material for a few months and it may take a while, don't feel like you have to rush and put together a written routine all within a week. Sometimes it just comes over time, over the course of a couple months or so. So don't rush it too much. But when you get to that point where you feel comfortable and confident that, hey, I have a solid routine, I'm ready for that next step, that's when you and I talk and we just kind of solidify some material. I'm going to suggest maybe we take that out, or we find a way of punching it and changing it, making it funnier. Working on transition segues is what they call them, between one bit and the other, so it's a smoother transition through the whole flow of the routine. So don't memorize the middle of the routine just yet, because there could be changes, but you can work on the wording choices and making it more colorful and funny. And I would suggest don't share that you're doing stand-up comedy with all your friends. have this be our secret, because don't tell your friends, because if you tell your friends that, oh, I'm putting together a stand-up comedy material, they're going to want to see it. Oh, tell it to me, tell it to me. Two things happen. One, you burn your material, and two, you don't have the synergy and just the, I don't want to say magic because that makes it seem just goofy. You don't have the same atmosphere as you would have if you were doing stand-up comedy. In stand-up comedy, there's that synergy, that interaction where you're getting a response from the audience, and that helps you with your timing, and that helps with how you deliver and all that kind of stuff. You want that. So you don't want to burn your material with your friends. It's better to actually have your material done and then tape a live performance of you doing real stand-up and then showing them that. So it would be my suggestion that you don't tell a lot of people that you're doing stand-up. Let it be a surprise for them, and then they will be surprised and have that. So that is the things I wanted to share. One last thing I do want to say. This video on how to do it is really geared towards the novice comedians that have never done this before. And this isn't for people that are looking for a new job. I mean, this is really just to have a skill set that's in your back pocket. This is so you could be a sleeper cell for God. You know, when you may be called on to do it, you just refresh your memory on it, and then you're ready to go in different situations or settings. It isn't something that, you know, you need to make a whole new career because everybody's too busy. You know, that's not really the gist of it for the novice comedians. Now, having said that this is for novice comedians, I also would like people that are professional comedians, or if you know people that are professional comedians, to also contact me, because in our database, we do want to have some professional comedians that will be ringers. There will be occasions where we will need ringers to be brought in for certain venues. So, and we understand if it's your primary vocation, that this is your livelihood and you need to get paid. So as you contact me, go ahead and put in what a general pay range of what would be good, what won't be good. And I understand it's like, okay, this much if it's one performance excluding travel expenses, those kinds of things. So go ahead and contact me so we can incorporate you into our database, and we'll just go from there. All right. Love you. Bless you. Be well. Bye-bye.